This learning objective is going to be talking about the pathogen Neisseria meningitidis, which causes meningitis and is the leading cause of meningitis. So we will discuss the disparity that this creates. Maybe not necessarily the pathogen, but how these two interact with one another and how this disease created by the pathogen leads to, is further complicated by this disparity. So let's begin by just explaining that the disparity that we're going to mention is going to be basically based in the United States, so it doesn't expand outward. And the disparity is that meningitis is going to impact and affect minority groups at higher rates than white groups in the United States. This is due in the fact of, as you can see in the infographic, that less minorities are receiving the meningitis vaccine than white people. The other bit of our disparity is that younger people are going to be impacted at larger rates, and that we are going to see that black males are going to be more likely to die from meningitis than others. So this disparity is a great problem and something that we should examine why and the impact. So firstly, the financial burdens of this is tremendous. If you can imagine having to stay for an extended period of time in the hospital, that is going to be an incredibly large gap created because people are not going to be able to afford that. People's lifestyles are going to be able to have to be changed, and people may lose their jobs taking care of their kids, or they themselves who have contracted the disease may not be able to financially afford this long stay. Secondly, we have unnecessary outbreaks and disease occurring that could have been prevented by a vaccination. So this is a large impact that we should have. Secondly, or the last one, would be the impact of the long-term effects. So meningitis, of course, is the created by Neisseria meningitidis, but it is an infection that happens once it gets into the meninges. So it will enter the brain, obviously, usually through the oropharynx, and it is going to create an inflammatory response, and the inflammatory response and it's being able to evade host interactions by having enzymes and other proteins that help block it from dying, eventually get it into the meninges and cause inflammation, which is, of course, meningitis. But the sequelae of afterward are having permanent impacts, such as people having hearing loss or seizures or other neurological problems. So this impacts people's lives beyond just having meningitis, which can be treated with antibiotics, but the long-term effects are lasting. So why do we see this disparity? So there's a lack of education about the vaccine. So many physicians are not giving minority groups education and literature about the vaccine, and especially at the important ages that parents and older people would need to know about it. People with limited access to health care might not seek treatment, and they might have the disease go beyond where it should, and so that would be a problem. And they might not also be able to afford the vaccine or be able to afford healthcare visits. So this is another thing. And people that are marginalized in society may not be given the time of day. And not being given the time of day and being spoken about is another reason why we see this disparity, because simply it doesn't impact maybe a majority of people. We just choose to ignore it. So what can we do to help? So we should give marginalized groups a voice, and we should make sure that we speak up for marginalized groups. We should educate ourselves on different treatments, and we should allow physicians to help them make these decisions. We should try to make healthcare accessible, and this would go with the education and educating people, and continue to make sure that we're making the world a better place for everybody. I cannot stress this enough, but I think that if there's a big takeaway is that it is education, not only making education and healthcare education more easily accessible, but that we should educate ourselves and do our own research, and physicians should seek to not only know that the disparity exists, but seek its elimination. Thank you.